Hello everyone, this is Ankit Jain. I welcome you all to my channel Tech Journey with Ankit. Today is day 17 of our LWC Bootcamp, and in today's session we will explore the bundle structure of LWC. Moreover, we will also be going to discuss about the naming convention as well as the case types. We will also try to understand what is the importance of each and every file in the bundle structure. So we can get started. Uh, a quick intro about me. My name is Ankit Jain. I do have more than 10 years of experience in the Salesforce ecosystem, where I got an opportunity to work as a corporate trainer as well as the Salesforce architect. I do have experience on the different clouds, including the Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, CPQ, and the billing. Moreover, I do have my expertise on the LWC and the integration too. In case you guys like to connect with me, these are the different channels which are available. You can connect with me over the YouTube, on the LinkedIn, as well as on the Telegram. The links you will get for all these different channels in the video description as well. So let's get started with the first discussion for today, that is the framework mode. Our Lightning Web Components do works in two different mode. One is the production mode and second is the debug mode here. So when to go for the production mode and when to go for the debug mode. The production mode is designed for what kind of users and the debug mode is designed for what kind of users. Let's try to decode this now. So by default, whenever we go and work on the org, let's say you have created the developer org or you are working on the sandbox, your org will always be in the production mode. So what is production mode? Production mode is something which is optimized for the better performance, which is optimized so that end users can see how the component will behave in the whenever you are deploying your component to the production org. Don't get confused between the production mode and the production org. You can enable your sandboxes, your developer edition by default, they are in the production mode. When I say the production mode, it is optimized for the performance. Here, who will get the benefit? The end users will get the benefit. So production mode is specifically for their end users. Their end users can be your QA or your UAT testers. They can be anything, right? However, the debug mode, this mode is designed specifically for the developers. In the debug mode, you will get the better code readability. Debug mode is very helpful whenever you have to debug your Lightning Web Component by using the Chrome tools. You will get the exact replica of the component whatever you have developed in the Chrome tool, right? So what I will recommend is, if you are following me in the bootcamp, make sure that you folks are enabling the debug mode in your component. The advantage that you get with the debug mode here is your code is always non-minified here. However, in the production mode, your code is minified. Minified means whatever the variable names that you have defined in your component, or the way you have written down the logic in your Lightning Web Component, it is optimized for the better browser performance, right? However, in the case of debug mode, that is not the scenario. Whatever the code that you have written, you will see the exact same code in the debugging tool. So how you should go and enable the debug mode? To do that, you have to navigate to your environment, and here you have to go and search the debug mode. You can enable the debug mode for the specific users. No need to go and enable the debug mode at the environment level. You can go and select the users for whom you want to enable the debug mode. For example, let's say in your org, you do have the 3 developers and the 2 QA users, right? So you can go and enable the debug mode for only 3 developers. No need to enable the debug mode for the QA users here. So in my org, I am the only user here and who will be also developing the component. So I am enabling the debug mode here. So as soon as you go and enable the debug mode, you will see one header here. That header will says that now my org is in the debug mode. For the logged in user, the org is currently working in the debug mode. And one key point about the debug mode here is debug mode is quite slower as compared to the production mode. Okay, and that is the reason whenever you are actually deploying your component, or whenever your end users are using your component, they should always be in the production mode and not in the debug mode here. So I have enabled this debug mode here. I will also recommend to do one more setting for the better debugging purpose, and for that you should go to the session management here. Under the session management, sorry, not under the session management, you should navigate to the session settings, and under the session setting, you should go and disable the Lightning Web Security, right? In case you are You want to see how the what kind of data you are getting from the Apex and it is not coming as expected. This is because the Lightning Web Security. So for the better debug, another additional thing that you can do in your developer environments, and do this only in the developer environments, not in the QA or the UAT or in the production org. Only in the developer environment, I will recommend that you should go and disable the Lightning Web Security here and click on save. So with these two changes, now our environment is good whenever we have to perform any debug job on our environment. Let's move forward with the next term, that is the naming convention. What should be the naming convention of your LWC component? The key thing about the naming convention here is, which is very important, that your component name always starts with the small case. You cannot start your component name with the capital case or with any number. It should always be starts with a capital, so it should always be starts with a small case. For example, let's say I have to go and create one component with the name of take journey with Ankit. So how I should go and create the component? As I said, my component name should always be starts with the small case. So irrespective of the case that I do have here, I should always have the small case here followed by the letter. Again, the remaining letters you can go and combine, but you cannot include any white space here. You can either replace this white space with the underscore, or you just go and concatenate all these different into the one single name, but you cannot include any white space in your component name. So again, I'm iterating the first point here, that your component will always starts with the lowercase. Next point says that your name must contain only alphanumeric and underscore character. Your name, it cannot contain any special character. For example, let's say if I have to go and put here @Ankit, again this is going to be the invalid name. Why? Because here I am using the special character here. So that's what the second point says. Third point says that your name, it cannot contain an hyphen. For example, let's say if again I do have the similar name, but here I have added the hyphen here. I'm not adding @, but I am putting a hyphen. Again, this is also invalid. Your component name, they cannot contain the hyphen here. The next point says that your name must be unique in the namespace. What this point says, for example, let's say you have created one aura component. Let's say I have created an aura component here as hello tech journey. Okay, this is the component that I have created with the aura framework. Now I am creating the same component for the LWC now. For example, I am creating the same component here for the LWC. This is not allowed. Again, this is invalid. You cannot create the same component name twice in the Lightning experience. So your name must be unique across the aura as well as the LWC. This point I already discussed. You cannot include any white space here. For example, let's say if this is my name here and here I am putting any white space. I am not putting anything, but I am putting any white space. Again, this is an invalid name. Next point says that your component can't end with underscore, right? So what this point highlight, for example, if I am putting the component name here with the underscore, again this is also an invalid name. Okay, you can put the underscores in between. For example, if I go and put the underscores in between, let's say I'm not putting the underscore here, but I am putting the underscore here as with underscore Ankit, then this is a valid name. But if I am putting the underscore in the last, it is considered as invalid. The next point says that can't contain two consecutive underscores as well. Your component name, it cannot contain two consecutive underscore. If I am putting one underscore, again it's a valid name, but if I am putting here two consecutive underscores, again it is invalid. Again, this component is invalid. So your component can contain only one underscore here. And the last point says that folder and the file names must have the same prefix name. Whatever the folders and the files that you are creating, for example, let's say I have created the component with the name as take journey with Ankit. Okay, so whatever the files that I do have in my component, let's say I do have here the, let me go and put here, let's say I do have here the HTML file, or I do have here the .jss file, or I do have here the .css file. All these files must be having the prefix as the component name. That is again mandatory. Okay, so I hope the naming convention is clear to everyone. In case you do have any questions on the naming convention, drop your questions on the comment section. Moving towards the next term, that is the case type. What all different case types that you need to consider whenever you are working on the Lightning Web Component. So particularly Lightning Web Component deals with three different types of cases. First is the Pascal case, second is the camel case, and third is the kebab case. Before I switch to the case type, let me show you first how to create the component, and from that created component we will try to understand how the case type will work here. So to create the component, we have to always navigate to our VS Code. We cannot create Lightning Web Component on the developer console. There is no provision from the Salesforce to create the Lightning Web Component from the developer console. You have to navigate to your VS Code. On the VS Code, you have to take the Control Shift P and you have to take the option here called SFDX Create Lightning Web Component. With the naming convention rule that we have learned, as I said, our component name will always starts with the lowercase. So let's say I am putting my component name here as Take Journey with Ankit Bootcamp. This is the first component that we are creating here, and I am naming that component here as Take Journey with Ankit Bootcamp. Okay, so as soon as you go and create the component, three different files will be created for you by default: HTML file, JavaScript file, and the XML file. Again, what is each of these file we will see in a while, but at the higher level, just understand whenever you are creating the component, the three files will be created, and the prefix of all these three files will be the same as the component name. As the component name here is Take Journey with Ankit Bootcamp, you can see that .html, .javascript, as well as the .xml, they all are holding the same prefix here. Okay, now let's try to understand the cases part here as we have created the component. What is Pascal case? Pascal case is something where the first letter is always in capital case. Pascal case is something where the first letter is always in the capital case. For example, if you see here in the part of item name, here I is capital. If I have to name this Take Journey with Ankit in the Pascal case, how I will go and put it? Only thing that I will do here is I will go and put the T in caps. So whenever I am putting the first letter in capital, it is referred as the Pascal case. So where we do have the Pascal case in the LWC component, so your JavaScript class will always be in the Pascal case. Your JavaScript class, that will be always be in the Pascal case. For example, this is the component that we have created. If I navigate to the JavaScript file here, you will see that the JavaScript class here, it is in the Pascal case. Next case that we do have here is the camel case. Camel case is something that we use whenever we are creating the component. As we discussed in a while, whenever we are creating the component, my component will always starts with the small case here. So for example, here if my component is starting with the small case, I can say that it is the camel case. It is the camel case here. Similarly, where we use the camel case, whenever we are creating the component, we use the camel case. Similarly, whenever we are defining the properties, then also we'll use the camel case here. What I mean from the properties here, first you can see the component that we have created, it is in the camel case. Now whatever the properties that we are defining here, right, my properties that I have to expose again, that should be in the camel case. So for example, let's say here I am creating one property as LWC Bootcamp. This is the one property that I am creating. So you can see here the property name is in the camel case. If I am creating another property, for example, let's say today's learning. Again, this property again in the camel case. So whenever we are dealing with the component name or whenever we are dealing with the properties, they both will always be in the camel case. Next thing is the kebab case. Now kebab case, what it is, whenever you have to refer any HTML component, right, inside another component. For example, let's say this is my HTML component. Inside this, I have to go and refer any tags or I have to refer any other component, then that component will be in the kebab case. How the kebab case will work, let's see with this with an example. So for example, let's say this is my component name that we have received, right? How I can go and convert this into the kebab case? To convert it into the kebab case, what you have to do here is you have to make sure that your complete name will be in the small case. Whenever you are working on the kebab case, everything will be in lowercase. Everything will be in the lower case. Whenever you are working on the kebab case, everything in the lower case. So whatever the name that you see here, you have to make sure that everything will be in the lower case. Now wherever you do have this capital case, you have to replace that capital case with hyphen and the lower case. So for example, here I do have this journey, where the J of the journey, it is starting with the capital case. I am replacing it with the hyphen slash small case. So here I go and put the journey. Similarly, here I do have the W. I will go and replace this W with the hyphen and the lower case. So here I am putting with. Similarly, here I do have the Ankit. I will go and replace this again capital A with the hyphen and the lower case, that is Ankit. So whenever you are dealing with this kind of a case, this is referred as the kebab case. What is this referred as? This is referred as the kebab case. So where we should use the kebab case, as I highlighted, whenever you are putting any HTML tags, or whenever you are defining any HTML attributes, we always go and put the kebab case. For example, in the last session, we discussed about the out of the box component that Salesforce do provide, right? Let me take you to the again out of the box components here. That is nothing but the component library. In the component library, what all different components that you will see, everything will be in the kebab case. For example, let's say, let me take you to the button here. So I'm typing the button, navigating you to the button, and from here again I'm copying the button. Let's get this opened. So you can see here I'm copying this button. Let's say I'm copying this button from here. You will see that the component name, what is it? It is in which case? It is in the kebab case. Let me take one more example. For example, let's say I am putting the input here. This time, let's say I am copying an input here. Uh, this input, you can see again my input, it is in which case? It is in the kebab case. So whenever you are dealing with any HTML tags, they are in the kebab case. Similarly, if you go and put any attribute here, for example, let's say I am putting the attribute here as message when bad input. You can see here all the attributes, they will also be in the kebab case. Not only the standard components, but also let's say you are created any custom component, then also you have to put that custom components in the kebab case. For example, let's say I have created one custom component as a hello world. If I have to add that custom component inside my another component, that is nothing but the component composition, then we have to go and put again everything under the kebab case like this. This is how we go and define the component and put everything into the kebab case. Okay, so always remember, whenever you are putting anything under the HTML file, right, that will be in the kebab case. Let's come to the next topic for discussion, that is the component bundle. Now what is component bundle? Component bundle is something which will define what all different files will be present in your component. So by default, whenever you are creating the component, we do get the three different files. First is the HTML file, second is the JavaScript file, and third is the XML file. But in addition to these files, you can also go and add two further files as well. One is the CSS file and second is the SVG file as well. CSS file we used whenever we have to add any external CSS to our component. SVG file we use whenever we have to introduce any SVG image in our component, then we go for the SVG file. So by default in our component we are getting these three files, and we can also add these two files as well. Only key thing that we have to remember here is whenever we are adding any file, the prefix of the file must be exactly same as the component name. If I have to add the CSS file here, I have to make sure that the prefix is exactly same, and I can go and create one CSS file inside this, in which I can go and write down my CSS code. Okay. Next thing is, in LWC we can create three different types of LWC component. First is the UI related component. UI related component means nothing but whenever we are creating the Lightning Web component, by default, the type of component that is created is a UI related component, where we do have the HTML file, JavaScript file, and the meta file. However, we can go and create the CSS and the SVG file, which is quite optional. It's completely up to your requirement whether you need this file or not. But these files are the required file: HTML, JavaScript, and the meta file. Another type of component that you can create is the CSS module component. What is CSS module component? Whenever you want to share your CSS across the different components, then we go and create the CSS module component. In the CSS module component, we only need two files. One is the CSS file and second is the meta file. So for example, if in this component, I am deleting the HTML file and I am deleting the JavaScript file from here, then whenever I do have these two files in my component, it is referred as the CSS module component. Again, I'm repeating, whenever in my Lightning Web component, I don't have the HTML file and the JavaScript file, that type of file is referred as the CSS module component. Another type of component that I do have here is the service component. What is service component? Service component is something where I do have the two different files. One is the JavaScript file and second is the meta XML file. Here we don't have the HTML file. There is no HTML file here. There is no HTML file here as well. We don't have any HTML file available in both the CSS module as well as in the service component. In the CSS module component, we only have the CSS file. In the service module component, we only have the JavaScript file. The only file which is common in all the different component is this meta file. The only file which is common in all these three different types of component is the meta file. So we can put the rule here that irrespective of the type of component that we are creating, meta file is always mandatory. Other types of file are optional. Irrespective of our requirement, we can go and delete that file as well. So to create the JavaScript file, we just need to go and put here the code as .js and my JavaScript file will be available. And my JavaScript file will be available. Okay, this is how we can go and create the JavaScript file as well as the CSS module component as well as the UI related components as well. Moving toward the next important part, that is the client server architecture. How the client server architecture will work in the Lightning Web component. So as we discussed, we do have the different types of file. We do have the HTML file, we do have the JavaScript file, and we do have the CSS file, right? So our Lightning Web component, they also follow the MVC architecture here. But this MVC architecture is quite different from the traditional MVC architecture here. In the LWC component, we can update the database directly from the controller file, and we can also update the database from the Apex classes as well. So for example, you do have an HTML file. From the HTML file, you have invoked some action. Let's say you clicked on the button or you change anything from something from the input, right? As soon as you do so any action on the HTML file, your HTML file will trigger an event to the JavaScript file. And based on the code that has been written, right, JavaScript file can directly update the database, or JavaScript file can transfer the control to the Apex classes, and from the Apex classes also you can update the database. The point that I want to highlight here is your database can be updated from the client side as well as from the server side in the Lightning Web component. Always remember that JavaScript is capable to update the Salesforce database. When I say the Salesforce database, means nothing but Salesforce standard objects and the custom objects here. Moreover, in case you do have the complexity, you can delegate that control to the Apex, and from the Apex, by using the DML statements, you can also go and impact the database. How to do that from the client side, how to do that from the Apex side, that we will see down the line as we move forward in our journey. But the point that you have to make a note here is your database can be updated from the client side controller, which is nothing but the JavaScript. So in LWC, your JavaScript is referred as the client side controller, and it can be also updated from the Apex as well, and your Apex is referred as the server side controller. Now, let's try to decode each and every file that we have created here. So in the first JavaScript file, what all different things we do have, as soon as we go and create a component, we get first import statement here, and that import statement is the lightning element. Right? What we are doing in the first import statement, we are importing the lightning element from the LWC module here. Right? Lightning element is the custom wrapper of standard HTML element here, and LWC is the core module of the lightning web component. It is mandatory that in your lightning web component you should put the import statement whenever you want to use the lightning web component functionality. Next thing here, in the next line, what we are doing here is we are extending the lightning element. Whatever the lightning element that we have imported, we are extending that lightning element here. And for that, we are creating our own custom component here. The custom component that we have created here, it must be in the Pascal case. Okay, so that is about the JavaScript file. Again, a quick revision. We are importing the lightning element here from the LWC module, and this is my component name, which we are extending the lightning element here. Next thing that we do have here is the HTML file. My HTML file will always starts with the template, and it will always ends with the template here. Okay, that is the key thing about the HTML file. Your HTML file will always starts with a template tag, and it will always ends with the template tag as well. Now, whenever you have to refer any other component inside the HTML file, that component must be in the kebab case. Either the standard component or the custom component, whatever the type of component that you have to refer in your HTML file, that component must be in the kebab case here. Next thing that we do have here is the CSS file as well. In the CSS file, what we can do, we can write down the external CSS code. So in case you are extending the CSS by putting the external CSS class, then you have to make sure that you are putting the dot. We have learned the similar rules in the HTML, JavaScript, and the CSS module that we have covered before kicking off the Lightning Web Component Bootcamp. Similar rules which we are discussed on the day 2 of our LWC Bootcamp, all those rules are also applicable here. So here, whenever we have to go and refer the class name must be prefixed with dot followed by the class name here. Now here you can go and define the CSS attribute, and here you can go and pass the value here. By default, the CSS file is not created whenever we are creating the component. Whenever required, you have to manually go and create that component file. But the key thing here is whenever you are creating the file must be having the same name as the component name. In this file, you can use the standard CSS syntax. What the kind of a syntax that we have used in our mini projects previously, the kind of a syntax that we have used when we are understanding the JavaScript. See, likewise, you can also go and write down the standard CSS here. Only key thing here that you have to note here is if you guys worked on the aura, like in the aura, whenever we are writing down the CSS file, we have to use the dot this operator. However, in the lightning web component, that is not required. There is no need to put dot this operator whenever you are working on the CSS file. Moving towards the last file that we will be discussing is the configuration file. So what is configuration file? Configuration file will define how you are exposing your component to the lightning world. Whether you want to expose your component to the flows, whether you want to expose your component to the communities, or you want to expose your component to the app builder. That exposure part, you will go and define it here. So whenever you have to expose your component to the outside world, the key thing that you have to do here is you have to go and put is expose as true. The key thing that you have to do here is that here you have to go and put the is expose as true. One key note that you have to always remember here is whenever the component that you are creating, it is the supporting component for the parent. For example, let's say you have two different components. One is the parent component and another is the child component. If you are exposing the parent component, your child component will be automatically exposed irrespective of the parameter value that you are putting up here. But in case you want to use your component individually and then also want to expose the component, so here you have to go and put is expose as true. And after that, here you have to go and specify for what all different targets you want to expose the component. Whether you want to expose the component to the app page or to the record page or to the home page or to the flow screen or as a quick action or to the community builder, you can go and define more than one targets here. Again, down the line in the bootcamp, we will further deep dive into the configuration files as well, where we will see how we can create more generic component by using this configuration file. In case you folks worked on the Aura, the configuration file somewhat similar what we do in the design file of the Aura. That's what I do have, folks, for this today's session. I hope you like the today's session. In case you do have any questions or any queries, please let me know in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer it. If you folks like the session, make sure you click the like button and also subscribe the YouTube channel as well. Thank you. Have a good time. Bye bye.